The ballroom froze the moment she stepped in. Every whisper vanished. Every glass paused mid-air. Under the golden light of the chandeliers, a woman in a white gown stood at the top of the marble staircase. Tall, radiant, and calm. Her skin glowed like polished mahogany, her eyes steady as moonlight. No one dared to breathe. Moments earlier, these same people had been laughing, mocking the maid their billionaire host had invited as a cruel joke. But now silence ruled the room, because nothing about her looked like the caricature they expected. There was no shame, no fear, only grace. And as she began to descend, step by step, the air itself seemed to bend around her. No one knew yet what that night would become. How a single photograph taken in the dark would expose arrogance, ignite compassion, and turn humiliation into triumph. Sometimes all it takes is one act of courage to rewrite an entire story. And this is one of those nights. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to Golden Tales, where every story reminds us that dignity can shine even in the darkest rooms. Stay until the end, because what happened after this moment will leave you speechless, and might just change the way you look at people forever. It all began a few weeks before that unforgettable night. At 2 a.m., the offices of Whitmore Holdings were silent, except for the rhythmic sound of a mop sliding across the marble floors. Clara Lewis moved carefully, humming a soft gospel tune under her breath. She had cleaned that same building for almost 15 years. Boardrooms where decisions worth millions were made by people who never once remembered her name. But Clara wasn't bitter. She believed in quiet strength, in doing things right even when no one was watching. Until that morning. When she arrived, a letter waited for her at the reception desk. Ivory paper, gold seal, her name written in elegant cursive. Mrs. Clara Lewis, it said. You are cordially invited to the annual Whitmore Foundation Gala. First she laughed. It had to be a mistake. But the receptionist's smirk told her otherwise. Congratulations, the woman said, her tone dripping with irony. Looks like someone's moving up in the world. Later that night, two executives passing by didn't notice Clara nearby. One whispered, "Can you imagine her showing up in that uniform?" The other laughed. "Maybe she'll bring her mop as an accessory." Clara said nothing, but her eyes, once gentle, turned still and sharp. That night, under the dim light of her small kitchen, she unfolded the letter again, and without a single word, she made a decision that would change everything. Clara barely slept that night. The golden invitation lay on her kitchen table, glowing faintly under the flickering light bulb. She stared at it between sips of lukewarm tea, her mind replaying every whisper, every laugh she had ever ignored. Her daughter, Lila, woke early for work and found her mother still sitting there. The letter unfolded in front of her. "Mom, what's that?" Clara smiled faintly. "An invitation. From Mr. Whitmore himself." Lila frowned. "That man? Why would he invite you?" Clara looked down at her calloused hands. "Maybe to laugh, maybe to test me, but it doesn't matter." She folded the letter with care, her voice calm but resolute. "I'm going." Lila blinked. "To their world? Dressed like?" Clara interrupted softly. "No, dressed like me." That afternoon, she took a day off, the first in months, and took the subway to Manhattan. The streets pulsed with noise, luxury, and indifference. No one looked at her twice as she passed glittering windows displaying dresses that cost more than her rent. But inside one quiet boutique, tucked between designer stores, she stopped. "Good afternoon," said a young saleswoman, her eyes flickering with doubt. Clara smiled kindly. "I'd like to see something white." The woman hesitated. "White, ma'am? For a gala?" "Yes," Clara said. "For a new beginning." She ran her hand over silks and laces, fabrics that felt like clouds between her fingers. Then she saw it. A gown simple yet majestic, its ivory tone soft as dawn light. She tried it on. The mirror didn't lie. It showed the same woman who had spent her life scrubbing floors. Yet somehow different. Her back was straighter, her gaze unbreakable. For the first time, she didn't see exhaustion in her reflection. She saw power. Not the kind that shouts or humiliates, the quiet kind, the kind that survives. She paid with trembling hands, using the money she'd saved for years, just in case. But deep down, she knew this was that case. As she left the boutique, the city wind caught the edge of the dress bag, fluttering it like a flag. She looked up at the skyline, those same towers where no one ever noticed her, and whispered, "They'll notice me now, not because I need them to, but because I finally see myself." The night of the gala arrived wrapped in luxury. At the Whitmore estate, golden lights spilled from tall windows, music floated from a string quartet, and laughter shimmered over the clinking of crystal glasses. Ethan Whitmore moved through the ballroom with the confidence of a man who owned everything he touched. He raised his champagne flute, smiling that thin smile people mistake for charm. "Tonight," he said to a group of investors, "we'll have something different, a bit of cultural variety, shall we say?" The men laughed politely, their wives forcing awkward smiles. Everyone knew Ethan had a cruel sense of humor. No one ever dared to stop him. At precisely 8:43 p.m., the doors at the top of the marble staircase opened. The quartet stopped playing. Conversations froze mid-sentence. And there she was. Clara Lewis, though no one recognized her at first, stood framed in light. Her white gown shimmered like moonlit silk. Her skin glowed with warmth against the cold luxury around her. Her posture was serene, almost regal. Each step she took down the staircase echoed through the hall, slow and deliberate, like the toll of a church bell before a reckoning. People whispered, "Who is she? She's stunning. Wait, isn't that?" When Ethan finally saw her face, the color drained from his. He laughed under his breath, forcing composure. "Well, look who decided to join us." Clara met his gaze calmly. "You invited me." The words fell like stones into the silence. He gestured toward her, pretending amusement. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is one of our most dedicated staff members. I thought she might enjoy seeing what success looks like up close." A ripple of uneasy laughter passed through the guests. Clara didn't move. Her voice, when it came, was steady. "Success doesn't impress me, Mr. Whitmore. Character does." The laughter died. All eyes turned toward Ethan. His jaw tightened. "Careful how you speak, Ms. Lewis. This is a private event, not a stage." Clara's lips curved faintly. "Then why are so many masks here?" Someone gasped. Near the buffet table, a woman in a diamond necklace approached, holding a glass of red wine. "You look lovely," she said sweetly, her words dripping with poison. "It's refreshing to see someone like you trying so hard to fit in." And then, whether by accident or intent, the wine spilled. Crimson drops splashed across Clara's white gown, spreading like wounds on snow. The crowd gasped. Ethan smirked. "Oh dear, accidents happen." Clara looked down at the stains, then lifted her eyes. "Accidents happen," she said quietly. "Cruelty takes planning." Her voice was soft, but it carried through the room like thunder. No one moved. Ethan's smirk faltered. "You think this makes you equal to us?" She tilted her head slightly. "No, Mr. Whitmore. I don't need to be equal to anyone here." She stepped closer, her tone unshakable. "I just needed you to see me, not as your cleaner, not as your joke, as a woman who never stopped standing, even when you thought I belonged on my knees." The silence that followed was heavy, sacred. And then, without another word, Clara turned and walked away. Her heels clicked against marble like a heartbeat. No one laughed. No one moved. Only the faint sound of the doors opening echoed behind her. And for the first time in Ethan Whitmore's life, the room he commanded felt unbearably small. Outside, the night air was sharp and silent. Clara stepped into it as if stepping through a veil. Behind her, the music inside resumed. Forced, fragile, pretending nothing had happened. She didn't look back. Her dress, still damp with wine, shimmered faintly under the garden lights. The cold air bit her shoulders, but her heartbeat was calm. For the first time that night, she felt free. Near the valet stand, a young photographer lingered, part of the hired staff documenting the event. He knew Clara. They'd exchanged small smiles during late-night cleaning shifts at the office. And now, seeing her walking alone down those marble steps, head high despite the stains, something inside him stirred. He lifted his camera. Click. The flash burst softly against the night. That single image captured everything. Grace, pain, pride, and defiance. All in one step. The next morning, that photograph was everywhere. At first, it appeared on a local photographer's feed with the caption, "The maid who walked like a queen." Within hours, it was shared thousands of times. Then millions. People across the country began asking, "Who is she?" Comment sections flooded with admiration. True elegance can't be bought. She didn't need a crown. Her dignity was enough. This is the woman I want my daughter to see. The story spread faster than wildfire. Clara Lewis, a name no one in the corporate world had ever bothered to remember, became a symbol of strength overnight. Meanwhile, Ethan Whitmore woke to a nightmare. His phone buzzed endlessly with calls, notifications, and messages from his PR team. "Ethan, you need to see this," his assistant said, pale. He scrolled through headlines. Billionaire's cruel joke backfires. Humiliation turns to heroism. Who really holds the power? The maid or the millionaire? By noon, sponsors had begun withdrawing from partnerships. Shareholders demanded an emergency meeting. The foundation board released a statement condemning the unethical behavior displayed at the Whitmore Gala. Ethan slammed his phone onto the table. "She's a nobody. This is ridiculous." His lawyer looked at him, expression cold. "Not anymore, Mr. Whitmore. The world has decided otherwise." The next few days were a blur of damage control. Ethan tried everything. Public statements, excuses, even the old standby. It was all a misunderstanding, but the more he spoke, the worse it got. Leaked emails surfaced, revealing that the invitation had been planned as a joke among executives. Screenshots confirmed it. "Let's see how far she makes it before someone calls security," one read. The internet didn't forgive. #Clara Lewis trended for a week straight. Talk shows discussed her poise, her calm, her unspoken message. What had been a cruel prank became a mirror, showing the world exactly what privilege looked like when it mocked humility. And Clara? She remained silent. She still went to work, still clocked in at dawn. She didn't post, didn't speak, didn't even correct the wild rumors. Her silence spoke louder than any press conference could. At the office, people began treating her differently. The same men who once ignored her now lowered their voices when she passed. The receptionist avoided her gaze entirely. But Clara never gloated. She smiled the same quiet smile and went about her day, sweeping through the lobby with the calm of someone who no longer needed the world's approval. Because she had already won, not through revenge, but through grace. When asked later why she hadn't fought back publicly, she simply said, "Sometimes the truth doesn't need a defense. It just needs time." And time, indeed, was all it took. In less than 2 weeks, the man who once thought himself untouchable watched everything he'd built crumble. Partnerships gone. Investors silent. Invitations rescinded. The man who mocked a woman for not knowing her place finally discovered his. Weeks passed. The frenzy of headlines slowly faded, replaced by the next scandal, the next story. But some stories don't vanish. They linger, like a quiet melody that refuses to stop echoing. For Clara, life returned to its rhythm, though it would never be quite the same. People still stared sometimes, unsure whether to offer sympathy or admiration. Her photo still hung on walls, printed in magazines, shared across timelines. But she kept her humility intact. She still rode the same subway, wore the same shoes, worked the same hours. Only one thing had changed, the way the world looked at her. One morning, as she left for work, she found a small white envelope slipped under her door. Inside was a handwritten note, in the rounded letters of a child. Dear Mrs. Lewis, my name is Grace. I'm 12 years old. I saw your picture online and showed it to my mom. She told me you were brave. But I think you were more than brave, you were beautiful. When I grow up, I want to walk like you do. Thank you for showing me that people can be powerful without shouting. Love, Grace. Clara pressed the letter to her heart. Her eyes welled with tears, the kind that heal rather than hurt. For the first time in weeks, she let herself cry. A few days later, a producer from a popular talk show reached out. They wanted her to tell her story. First, she refused. She didn't want attention, only peace. But then she thought of Grace, of the little girl who had written those words, and of all the other girls who might still think their worth depends on how others see them. She accepted. The studio was bright, filled with cameras and soft golden lights. Clara sat in the middle of the stage, wearing the same white dress, now cleaned, restored, and radiant again. The host smiled gently. Clara, the world has seen your photo, but they haven't heard your voice. What would you like to say to those who mocked you? Clara paused. Then, in her calm, steady tone, she said, I didn't go to that party to prove anyone wrong. I went because I was tired of living as if I didn't belong. All my life, people have told me to stay quiet, stay small, stay grateful. But I realized silence is not the same as peace. And humility doesn't mean disappearing. She looked toward the audience. I didn't wear that dress to impress them. I wore it to remember who I am. A woman who works hard, who loves deeply, who deserves to feel beautiful, even if no one claps for her. The crowd rose to their feet. Applause thundered through the studio, but Clara didn't smile out of pride. She smiled out of release. The kind of peace that comes only when you finally stop hiding. Meanwhile, Ethan Whitmore faced an entirely different reality. His empire crumbled. Former employees came forward, exposing patterns of arrogance and discrimination. He was removed from his own board, abandoned by sponsors, ignored by friends who once worshipped him. Reporters chased him for comments, but his silence wasn't noble. It was hollow. He had built an empire of glass and learned, too late, that dignity was the only wall that never breaks. Months later, Clara received another letter, this time from a women's foundation. They wanted her to speak at schools, to share her story with young women about courage and self-worth. She accepted humbly, but she never quit her job. She said she didn't need to stop cleaning to know her worth. She just needed to clean from a higher place. Her children, Marcus and Lila, watched her on stage one day, speaking to a crowded auditorium. Sometimes, Clara said, strength doesn't look like shouting or fighting. Sometimes it looks like walking away with your head held high. They cried quietly in the back row, proud beyond words. One Sunday morning, Clara stood on her small balcony, coffee in hand, the sunrise painting the Bronx skyline in gold. Her daughter stepped beside her and said softly, Mom, you changed things? Clara smiled. No, baby. I just stopped letting them change me. The wind lifted her hair as light spilled across the city. And for a moment, she felt the whole world breathing with her, still, quiet, and whole. Sometimes the greatest courage isn't found in noise or revenge. It's in standing tall when the world tries to make you bow. Dignity doesn't need permission. It doesn't need wealth, beauty, or power. It just needs you and the strength to remember who you are. If the story moved you, give it a like, share it with someone who needs hope today, and tell us in the comments which moment touched your heart the most. Because in the end, true elegance isn't what we wear. It's how we walk through life when no one expects us to shine. Stay with us for more stories like this, only on Golden Tales, where every soul has a story worth telling. Sparkles.